Welcome to the Depth Dive. We're jumping to some really rich and pretty thought-provoking source material today.
Absolutely. It's excerpts from a thinker who, well, really grappled with the big questions, didn't he?
Totally. What it means to be human, how we know anything, faith.
hmm
It's all in there.
Yeah.
So our mission, like always, is to help you kind of cut through the complexity.
Yeah.
We want to pull out the essential insights,
See what light they shed on your own understanding of yourself, of the world.
Exactly. And these sources, they really go there. Themes like human misery and greatness.
The strange ways our minds work, the limits of just using reason.
Right. The nature of truth itself, and, well, a pretty compelling case for religious belief.
It really is a journey into some fundamental territory,
Yeah.
exploring the human condition right at its core.
Yeah.
And this source, it doesn't shy away from the tough parts. It presents this view of humanity that's, well, deeply flawed, but also strangely noble.
Paradoxical, yeah. Okay, let's unpack this. What jumps out right away, I think, is this observation near the beginning. This striking difference between people who sincerely seek knowledge about, their fundamental state, why they're here, what this world is.
What happens next?
Right. And those who just seem content to, well, live without thinking about it much.
And the source frames that really powerfully. It argues that having doubts, feeling uncertain about these ultimate things, that can actually be a sign of, a thoughtful mind, someone genuinely searching.
But being totally indifferent or even bragging about not caring.
That's seen as like a monstrous state.
Mm-hmm.
The source basically asks, how can you not be alarmed? Not knowing who put you here, what this place is, what comes after.
It paints such a vivid picture of human misery. We feel like these tiny specks, an atom, a shadow.
Surrounded by these infinities, the massive universe, the infinitely tiny.
And that's a core insight right there. The source places us as this mean, this middle point between those infinities.
Exactly. And because of that position, we can never get perfect, certain knowledge of everything.
But we're not totally ignorant either.
No. We're always navigating this uncertain sort of intermediate state.
And building on that, the source brings in this idea that nature is naturally corrupt. That explains the misery of man without God.
Right. It suggests we're made of these two opposite natures, soul and body.
How does that duality play into the misery?
Well, that duality is just central to the argument about our contradictions. We've got impulses from both sides, right? Creating this internal conflict. It's this sense of being fallen, fragmented, that the source thinks is absolutely key to why we feel so restless, so incomplete.
Which leads straight into diversion. The source really focuses on this.
Oh, yeah.
Why is it, according to this thinker, that even kings, people with everything, are miserable without distractions? Why do we load ourselves up with worries about honor, money, friends, or obsess over catching a hare?
Okay, this is a key insight into behavior, according to the source. Diversion is presented as like the main way we avoid facing our basic misery, our fragility, and definitely the thought of death, yeah. We just keep busy with external stuff, work, fun, chasing ambitions.
Anything.
Literally anything, yeah, to stop thinking about what we really are and where we're headed.
And the paradox is, if we were actually happy, we wouldn't need all that diversion, would we?
Exactly. The source suggests the very need for constant distraction isn't a sign of a full life. It's maybe the opposite.
A symptom.
A symptom of deep unhappiness, masking deeper problems. Diversion might feel like happiness for a bit.
But it depends on outside things.
Right, and it stops us looking for a real lasting remedy.
It's a powerful picture of our misery, but the source also sees it pointing towards our greatness, weirdly enough.
It is odd, isn't it? We're only restless, only seeking these distractions, because we still have this idea of a happiness we've lost, a state we were meant for.
But we look in the wrong places.
We look at external things when, according to the source, it can only be found somewhere else entirely.
Which brings us to the other side. Human greatness and, well, vileness at the same time.
Yeah, capable of all and of nothing, neither angel nor brute, but man, it's a baffling contradiction.
And he says our weaknesses, our infirmities, they actually prove our greatness, like a discrowned king. We know ourselves little, but it's great to know ourselves little. What's that about?
That's striking, isn't it? It's not just saying we're flawed, it's arguing our ability to recognize our limits, our misery, our dependence.
That recognition itself.
It's seen not just as a flaw, but as proof we were made for something more, something better than we are now. The source says thought itself is admirable, potentially, but it's ridiculous in its defects. Even our highest natural faculty is compromised. The greatness is in the capacity for something higher, even if we fall short.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Given this state of misery, these limitations, how do we even try to understand the world?
Well, the source looks at the tools we use, imagination and reason, and
Yeah.
it's pretty blunt about their failings.
Yeah, imagination gets called the deceitful part of man.
Mistress of error and falsity. Doesn't always lie, but lies often enough that you just can't rely on it.
And yet, imagination is what dispenses reputation, assigns respect. He uses that image of judges and magistrates depending on it.
It's a sharp critique, isn't it? How easily we're swayed by appearances, by perceptions, even when we think we're being rational.
Right, even our big institutions, our judgments, can be based on something as flaky as popular opinion or just outward show.
And that ties right into the power of custom and opinion, that famous line.
Truth on this side of the Pyrenees, error on that.
Exactly. It powerfully shows how arbitrary our ideas of justice can be. Just depends on where you are, what the norms are.
So what's legal here might be wrong just across the border, simply because of power.
Pretty much. Justice, Belsa's source suggests, often boils down to what the rulers say it's the right of the sword, which leads to all these baffling contradictions across history and cultures. Things like theft, or worse, being seen as virtuous sometimes. The source argues there is a true universal natural law, but our corrupted reason and custom have just messed everything up.
So we obey laws just because they're enforced, not because they're inherently true.
All of a sudden, yeah, we obey because they exist and there's power behind them.
And reason itself, our supposed best tool, also presented as incredibly limited.
Oh, absolutely. The slightest thing disrupts it. A creaking door, a fly buzzing.
Can't even hold two thoughts clearly at once.
Right. The source kind of echoes the skeptics here. How can we be sure our senses aren't tricking us? Are we dreaming right now? The point isn't necessarily to say we know nothing, but to show that reason alone, our natural ability, just doesn't seem capable of giving us absolute rock-solid certainty about the big stuff.
Which sounds pretty bleak. Imagination is tricky, reason's limited, custom is arbitrary. Where do we find truth?
Yeah, and the source mentions the philosophers hunting for the sovereign good.
Coming up with 288 different answers. Some even saying suicide was the way.
It really highlights the futility the source sees in relying only on these natural human tools, imagination, custom, reason to find ultimate truth or happiness. We seem stuck.
Searching, but not finding solid ground.
But the source does offer a way out of just total despair or skepticism. He notes that, nature itself kind of stops us from doubting everything in practice.
Okay.
And crucially, he introduces a totally different path. The heart has its reasons, which reason knows not.
Ah, the famous line. So there are things we can be sure of, but it's not just through logic. It's something else.
Precisely. According to the source, fundamental principles, the bedrock, even in things like geometry, aren't known by reason's fancy proofs, but by the heart.
The heart.
Yeah. It provides a different kind of certainty, a foundational knowing that maybe comes before or alongside rational thought. And this opens the door to where this source says true light might actually be found.
Which brings us nicely to the third part. Seeking that light. The source makes a really powerful claim here.
Which is?
That a true religion has to provide the answer to the human condition. It just laid out the misery, the greatness, the conflict.
And the central claim is that the Christian religion uniquely does this, because it shows knowledge of human nature in its fullness, both the amazing greatness and the deep misery.
And crucially, identifies the cause of both.
Exactly. It doesn't just pick a side, it actually embraces the paradox.
So it explains that internal conflict we feel, and the source talks about God being hidden, but deliberately hidden.
Yes, a deliberate hiddenness, but not total obscurity. According to the source, God hides from those who run away from him, but is visible to those who really seek him wholeheartedly.
How does he put it?
There's enough light for those who wish earnestly to see, and enough obscurity for those of a contrary mind. The very fact God isn't blindingly obvious is seen, for the seeker, as part of the evidence. It allows for faith.
Okay, and then the source gets into several proofs for Christianity. Prophecies seem really important here.
Oh, huge emphasis on these. The source argues their power is in their incredible precision details about the exact time and way the Messiah would come.
Right.
Well, he points to specifics like expecting him under the fourth monarchy, before the second temple fell, the cryptic but precise 70 weeks of Daniel.
Okay.
And prophecies foretelling the scattering of the Jews, but also the calling of the Gentiles.
And that image of the Messiah starting small, like a little stone, but growing into a mountain, overturning idols.
Yeah. And what's really compelling, the source argues, is that big historical figures, Cyrus, Alexander, the Romans, without even realizing it, were kind of unconsciously working to fulfill these old predictions.
Wow, like pieces in a bigger puzzle they didn't see.
That's the force of it, suggesting this divine plan woven through history, using even empires who had no idea.
And the Jewish people themselves.
Their continued existence, scattered but preserving the texts, is seen as this powerful ongoing witness to the very prophecies they might not interpret in a Christian way.
Okay, another key proof. Miracles.
Miracles are framed as, like, necessary signs. External validation for the doctrine.
Yeah, because examples.
Yeah, like Jesus healing the man born blind on the Sabbath. That miracle challenged the rigid rules of his opponents, right?
Yeah.
Forced them to confront the power itself, not just judge it by their existing beliefs.
And there's that interesting logical point that false miracles actually prove true ones exist.
It's like counterfeit money proves real money exists, right?
Yeah.
Or fake cures imply real ones are possible. The very idea of a fake miracle depends on the possibility of a real one.
Interesting.
The source also mentions specific examples from his own time, like the miracle of the holy thorn, as times he sees God acting, sometimes connected to disputes within the church.
Perpetuity is another proof. The long history of the Jewish people and the endurance of Christianity.
Right. The Jews surviving against all odds, scattered like the prophecies said, is presented as a living testament.
And Christianity.
Its survival and spread from, really humble beginnings, overcoming huge opposition. The source sees that as more than just historical luck. Points to something supernatural.
The doctrine itself is also a proof. How it explains our nature and offers redemption.
Yeah, the doctrine reveals the source of our misery, the fall, sin, pride, and offers the fix in Jesus Christ through grace, humility, self-denial.
Why is that compelling?
Because, the source argues, it leads to a balanced, realistic view of ourselves. It inspires both esteem for what we were meant to be and a deep, honest look at our fallen state.
And finally, Jesus Christ himself. Central figure, powerful proof.
His unique character has highlighted simple but profound teachings. His heroic soul, even in weakness, like his agony before death.
The lack of bitterness towards enemies in the Gospels.
Exactly. The source says these details aren't what you'd typically invent for a hero. They suggest something real. And his identity as Redeemer is seen as prefigured all through the Old Testament.
Not just in prophecies, but in types or figures.
Yeah, earlier people or events that sort of foreshadowed Christ.
So Old Testament stories and laws aren't just history, but have symbolic meanings pointing to Christ. Like circumcision of the heart, not just the body.
Exactly. Or the Red Sea crossing as a symbol of redemption. The source argues the literal meaning of some Old Testament things might even be incomplete or false if you don't get the spiritual sense pointing to Christ.
He gives an example.
Yeah, seated dexterous me, sit at my right hand. Literally, absurd. God doesn't have a physical hand.
Oh.
But spiritually, it shows Christ's elevated status. These figures were meant to prepare people for Christ.
And all this leads to a different view of faith itself, not just reason, but a gift of God, received by inclining the heart.
Inclina cor meum Deus in testimony tua. Incline my heart, O God, unto thy testimonies. That's a key phrase. True faith involves the will, a willingness to believe and trust.
Which is seen as grace, not just intellectual agreement.
Right, distinguishing it from beliefs based only on reason or external stuff. It suggests true fear comes from faith and hope, recognizing God's power and trusting him, while false fear is just doubt and despair.
Okay, so pulling it all together. The source presents these two core linked truths from true religion. 1, there's a God we can know.
And 2, our human nature is so corrupted, we're inherently unworthy of him in our natural state.
And the danger is knowing one without the other.
Exactly. Knowing only God without our misery leads to pride, self-sufficiency like the philosophers trying to achieve good on their own steam.
And knowing only our misery without a redeemer
Leads straight to despair. Nihilism like atheists seeing only the darkness.
So it's only through Jesus Christ, who fixes our misery, that we can truly know God, ourselves, life, death, in the right way.
Yeah. The source even uses analogies like the infinite gap between body and mind is just a figure for the infinitely more infinite gap between mind and charity, which is supernatural.
That's where grace comes in, bridging that gap.
A supernatural gift, yeah, letting us move beyond our fallen nature towards God.
Now, even with this answer, the source isn't afraid to look inward, right? To critique how that truth can get lost or twisted.
No, he dedicates a lot of thought to debates within religion at the time. He critiques approaches he felt were corrupting the church's laws and models.
Losing sight of core things like truth and charity.
Exactly. He discusses internal debates, like over doctrines about grace, the five propositions, for instance. He saw certain methods, like maybe over-relying on probability or equivocation in moral thinking, as potentially distorting truth,
Straying from tradition.
straying from the clear teachings of tradition and the early church fathers, yeah. He's basically arguing that even people who have the truth can get tangled up in complex interpretations that obscure the main message.
And even with apparent contradictions in scripture or doctrine.
The source suggests the mark of true meaning is that it harmonizes all those contraries, especially in Jesus Christ.
So true understanding isn't just picking the bits you like.
No, it's finding a sense that reconciles even the parts that seem to clash. And this comprehensive harmony, addressing both sides of man, misery and greatness, instinct and grace, that's presented as the unique strength and answer of Christianity according to the source.
Wow. We've really taken a deep dive into some incredibly complex, profound ideas here, guided by these sources.
Definitely. From the basic misery and, yes, startling greatness of being human.
The limits of our own minds, reason, imagination.
And finally, the source's view of how Christian faith, based on what he sees as proofs, like prophecy, miracles, and Christ himself, offers this unique, comprehensive answer.
Our goal, as we said, was just to pull out these core insights, help you navigate this thinker's grapple with these huge questions and become better informed.
It's definitely a perspective that forces you to confront your own inner contradictions, doesn't it? And think about reality itself as presented here.
Absolutely. So, as you reflect on all this, maybe consider the source's really challenging claim that understanding your own misery might not be the end point. Maybe it's the essential first step towards recognizing a necessary greatness and finding the path to seek something beyond yourself.